Thanks everyone for joining. We'll get started in just a couple minutes.
Try to see the diagrams you have in the background.
I will say I like our upbeat background music.
Yeah, it's pretty good, isn't it?
How's your day been, Laura?
It's been busy. I'm glad that this ended up being later in the afternoon because this morning was just like, you know what it's always like. It's like
it's a Thursday. That's how they go. That's how they go.
How about you? How's your day been?
It's been good and busy. It's been nice back to back, running around. Well, amazing. Looks like we're right at 3:02, so we'll go ahead and get the party started. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this panel discussion today on balancing compliance and creativity, the impact of energy code changes on projects. I'm Sandeep Ahuja, CEO and co-founder of cove.tool, the world leaders in sustainability consulting by bringing together technology and experts to deliver value to our clients. I have had the honor of being recognized as the top 100 women CEO titles by Inc., Forbes 30 Under 30, presenting at the UN Environment Assembly. I promise, last plug about me. Next month, Wiley will be publishing my book, Bill Like It's End of the World. And that's me. Enough about that. It's my great honor to introduce our panel today. First up, I'm joined by Laura, who is an architect with thoughtful and curious approach to design. Currently working as a project architect at Gensler, she focuses primarily on adaptive reuse and projects impactful to the local community, based here in Atlanta, where I'm also based out of. Her design work is characterized by thoughtful and innovative approach that contribute to the city's landscape. She is extremely engaged in leadership roles within the architecture profession. She is elected Georgia statewide representative to the National AIA Young Architects Forum and serves as the Emerging Professionals Director for her local AIA chapter. And these roles allow her to advocate for and support emerging architects. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Great company today. Thank you.
Amazing. Next up, we have Darguin, who is a visionary architect and the founding principal of Flow Design Architects, a firm recognized for its innovative approach to blending regulatory compliance with creative architectural solutions. With extensive experience in residential and commercial projects, Darguin has developed a deep understanding of evolving energy codes and their implications for design and construction. A registered architect in several states, including Massachusetts, Maine, Florida, Darguin's expertise in navigating complex regulatory landscapes has positioned him as a thought leader in the field. His firm, Flow Design Architects, has been at the forefront of integrating energy efficiency into design while maintaining aesthetic and functional integrity. Amazing. Let's go on and dive right into it. So just as a note for all the audience members, this is a short conversation. We'll be talking for about the next 20 to 25 minutes. But definitely feel free to pop in your questions, become a part of those conversations, and I will ask them throughout the conversation if there's good overlap, or save them to the end, if they're not necessarily flowing with the conversations. But definitely feel free to keep popping in your questions, and we'll take them as those come in. Well, welcome, Darguin and Laura. I'll ask my first question, Laura, to you. Since your work focuses so heavily on adaptive reuse, how have energy code changes impacted your approach to these projects, particularly in balancing the old with the new?
That's a great question and a tricky one as well. With existing buildings, you kind of have to make some assumptions and do your due diligence in terms of figuring out how the building performed when it was built. And that can be, back in the 1800s even, and there's no existing documentation. So you kind of have to do a little bit of work to figure out how that envelope performed, and also to really understand that although it doesn't comply with today's energy codes, there's still a value to why that building has been standing for so long, and understanding how you can mesh that with the the current energy codes of any additions or renovation work that you might be doing. So I guess the answer is an answer and a non-answer, because it's not always quite the same. You kind of have to take it on a case by case basis and work with what was the previous building technology, and see how that might mesh or not mesh well with our more hermetically sealed environments that we deal with today. We have a lot more air conditioned spaces now too, and keeping that in mind, there used to be not a lot of that. So how do we keep, especially in Georgia, moisture control at bay?
That's it. That's a really good call out. And I will say that, just like your answer, I mean, it makes sense that it's not the same each time, because our buildings are not the same each time. Our sites are not the same each time. And I know, Darwin, you touched on that a little bit. Of course, I didn't mention in your introduction, but you hold positions of leadership within the AIA as well, kind of bringing that community forward. But what I have, the more I've spoken to you, the more I've learned about, how you're consistently pushing the boundaries of what's possible to do within your own firm. If you could talk a little bit more about how you've redefined the workflow to be able to be the most innovative versions of yourself, that would be so exciting.
Yeah, so that's really, thank you for touching upon that side of efficiency and sustainability. What we've been doing at Flow is looking at the ecosystem of architecture, right? Like how do we even become an architect, and who has been historically able to become an architect, and how can we make it different, make it better for all of us. So, and it was because I was a misfit in many firms, and I decided that I was going to build a place where misfits were actually the norm. So that said, that's already an impactful way of running a practice. So then how can we make all kinds of buildings that also subscribe to the fact that they have to perform differently because they're different? Each building is different. So recently, thank God, with answers that started to come to us, because we didn't know what we were doing. So answers like, wait a minute, there is, the AIA framework for design excellence, right? So how can we begin to, because we weren't that sustainable for a while. We were just doing what our clients wanted us to do. We were somebody else's pencil for quite some time, which we don't want to ever be, right? So we said, okay, the norm is that these 10 principles are going to be your starter's kit for all of the projects, no matter what. So if the client opts out to not, there's actually not an option to not pick any of them. It's either, so which out of these 10 resonates most with you, and that started with the contract. So our contracts already have the framework embedded in it. Our handbook for everyone at the office has the framework embedded within that. What areas do resonate with you most, so that you can become the expert for all of us to then do the lunch and learns about economy, about designing for health, right, for energy, right? So and that also opens up doors for a lot of people that probably don't even want to be architects per se, because that's another thing I've been having a hard time with, and it's respecting that there is a place for all of us within the ecosystem. So you don't have to get licensed. I want you to, but maybe you become the energy expert, right? That will take care of all of those items and educate us about it. So now we're spoon feeding those elements little by little, because it's hard to come to people with, here it is, we're gonna do this, right? It's like little by little, as the firm has been growing and understanding the framework and understanding what's right to do within the firm by the diversity that we hire and embed within the company and the clients, and putting these principles throughout, then the buildings are now, it's like, well, I would have not thought of a building in any other way, right? Solar panels, they come with solar panels. Buildings come with heat pumps now. It's like you don't have to think about fossil fuel, you don't have to think about oil anymore, because that's just not how they come, because Flow doesn't make it like that. Of course, we have clients that don't subscribe, but and we touched upon that a little bit when we talked about it yesterday. But there's ways, and I guess as we continue talking, we can dive more deep into those things. But there's ways of getting them to subscribe in the process.
I love kind of how you described the architecture that you get from flow design almost as a product. This is how we have productized it. This is how we work, and this is the output that you will get. This is it. It's
Yeah, no,
not like I
that's it.
want this less, I want this. You can want things more, but you can't want things less. This is the minimum criteria that we have put out there. And I mean, I will say that, being a business owner myself, I can appreciate how hard that can be. Because a lot of times, especially when markets are up and down, you want work and you want to work with clients, and, to be able to make the tough calls, you got to be able to make the tough calls. So,
It takes time. Yeah, you have to be. We've been in business for 7 years now, right? And the redefining of flow, it's been happening, right? We've been losing the old skin and getting the new skin, like a reptile. And as we get it, we become a little bit more bold. But we also been pushed by the staff members. The staff members here say, I no longer want to say siding to be determined by owner. That's like the worst thing that you could possibly put there. I want to say this is the siding that makes a better environment, and
yeah.
I'm specifying it. And I don't want you to value engineer it, because I already looked up where you can get it and how you can get it for an affordable price. So, and they do their own research. I'm thinking of everyone here as a fellowship candidate for the AIA. Like, what's your research? Like, what do you care about? And letting them grow in that direction. So I hate being somebody else's pencil, like I said. And when you start letting the owners decide all of this stuff, then what did they hire us for? For our stamp? That's the least, because the building department requires it. That's what builders think of us. It's just the building department requires this person in the middle. Otherwise, we would have done it, right? No, it's because we create better products and better services and better experiences ultimately for the communities. So
Most definitely.
that's how we've been the DNA of flow, right? Like how we've been creating it. We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
But it's all a work in progress, right? Like, again, we haven't grown to the size that we have overnight. It's taken us, similar to y'all, 7 years. So couldn't agree more. I was curious, Laura, kind of switching gears a little bit, since so many of your projects focus on the community impact. You talked about, how you're focused on making sure that it's the right solution for the right project. I don't know if there's a project that comes to mind, or if there's a story that comes to mind on how you integrate the energy code compliances into designs that are not only sustainable, but also serve the local community's unique needs, and kind of balancing the ins and outs of that.
Sure. Yeah, a few projects come to mind. I've done a lot of work locally. So the Atlanta climate specifically tends to call out anything that building performance-wise is wrong with a building pretty quickly. We have a very humid climate. We're in I think climate zone 3 here. And when you are designing something for the community, another thing to note is that regardless of what current energy code we have, you always want to be a little bit future thinking. Who inhabits our older buildings? Typically, as newer buildings, or as buildings age, they belong to more economically disadvantaged parts of our society. So you really want to consider that really being conscious of how a building performs is how you are being responsible to the community. Buildings have shorter and shorter lifespans, but that's also part of it. Why do they have shorter lifespans? Is it because the building isn't performing well, and then at the end, it's causing itself to be less future-proof, which means that the community at some point will have to deal with a building that doesn't perform and isn't safe for its inhabitants. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it's kind of what I think about when I think about local architecture and why sustainability matters to being an architect that's in the service industry and is meant to have this social responsibility to our built environment, but also our community.
Yeah. I can almost hear it when you say these things, and we touched on this a little bit when we when we spoke about, kind of the balances that you have to make, where you're like specifying the product and you're specifying down to the level of degree. If you could speak a little bit about, how you're almost regaining control and reclaiming control to make sure that, we're building the right things, it can't get beat out. That would be super. That would be super insightful.
Right. I think it's hard to make sure that things don't get VE'd out, right? But if you can back it up with how the building performs, and your client sees the value in doing something that is not only meets code but exceeds code, that means that they're going to have a building with a lot of longevity, and that adds value to the building. So especially when working with developers, and if you can really make them see that or help them to see rather, the value of going beyond just meeting code requirements for performance. That is a way for every specification to kind of VE proof it, or at least have a better conversation about what it means to value engineer something. If there is something that is more cost effective, that performs in the same way, by all means, but we have to consider what is the life cycle of that decision. And something that specifically Gensler is pretty innovative with is they've got GPS, like it's Gensler product standards that tend to exceed what is required in terms of what products and materials we're specifying, and making sure that they're forward thinking in terms of how they're pushing the boundaries of what it means to have a sustainable product. So what is the carbon footprint of specifying a type of flooring? And just making little decisions like that. Sometimes there is no cost impact. So that's something you always want to consider as well.
Yeah, I guess I can jump in too. It's all a matter of having the right lenses when you're looking at things, right? So I always think about it was like an experiment that we did. I was in Asheville last year in a lecture, and they grabbed a potato and they put it in a microwave, and they grabbed a potato with aluminum foil and they put it in the microwave, and they put them outside. When you took the aluminum foil off of the one that had the aluminum foil, it was still warm. The other one was cold. It's shocking, and you're like, "What that? How many mils, right? Like that thickness?" But immediately shocks you to see it and say, "Well, it's the equivalent of you walking outside naked versus having a very nice jacket when you are in the winter." So, being able to put it in the perspective of the user and how it's gonna impact them, it's gonna shock them right away. So that's exactly the point, Laura. Like evidence based, right? Okay, this is a fact. And then listening to our clients is always a cliche thing that people say, but honestly, really truly listening to our clients is gonna ensure that it doesn't get because there's 10, let's say there's 10 principles. Let's just use the AI for now, right? But the clients don't know what that means. They may say, I don't want to have multiple levels on this floor because I'm gonna age. Well, that really means designing for change, right? So how do we translate that into a way that they could achieve it? So we can show them what that means. But if you didn't listen, you wouldn't know how to apply it. So I hate that there's always a draft. Well, what does that mean? Right? We gotta make sure this envelope and these windows are really good, so there's no draft, there's no air. So and then you can, translate that to the builder. That's the other part too, because depending on the delivery method, we're really foreign to the party. We are the ones that hosted the party, but somehow we get outcast out of the party. Because even when we're doing a construction administration, there's just so much that we have to worry about. And sometimes people shift from one team to another, or people move for another office, and they don't know, well, wait a minute, this was very important from the very beginning. So this brings me to another point of something that I learned. Let's call a continuity, continuity tab, something that people do in the military, where sergeant on 555, blah, 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 and then the next sergeant that comes into the place knows what the state of the union is. So we've been trying to track that here flow to make sure that there's continuity, and it makes it all the way to the end. And also a year after, when we do our post-occupancy study, like, okay, did it really achieve it, right? So then that creates a feedback loop. and we become a really good lean startup. Like we're always just learning. Let measure what is it? Learn, measure, build, measure, learn. So
Yeah.
that's the loop. That's the loop that we have to continue.
The
And there are
thing,
things that will be viral for sure, but the
the,
most will stay. You know.
the thing that I got most excited about, like there's so many nuggets in what both of you said, but the thing that I pulled back that reminds me of most projects that, I've worked on or we've worked on, it's all about that continuity. Like we'll do the feasibility study, we'll have a sustainability charrette, we'll lay out sustainability goals. The owner will be excited, the architect will be excited, the engineer will be excited. For us as sustainability consultant, our goal is to make sure that it keeps threading through into the schematic design phase, into the design development, into the construction drawing, and then into the construction. Because every time there's a change, every time there's a difference, to be able to truly validate it with data, and like Laura, to your point, be able to say, well, okay, these are the pros and cons of doing this. At the end of the day, this is as far as our decision making goes. We can empower you with information, but this is not my decision to make. And I really do think that it's the data piece and Darwin, the continuity piece, that connects to me the both of the thoughts that you're saying kind of in the same way, that we can't lose sight that projects can take some time to design and then even longer to build, and so much can change in that time with so many different folks involved. The larger the project, the more people involved. The
That's
larger the
right.
project, the more consultants involved, so the more possibility of change. So that's a really, really good thought, so thank
Sandeep,
you for
I have
sharing
a
that.
question.
Yeah.
Look, so since you're in the sustainability side as a consultant, I wonder, like, what's the workflow, right? Like, how do you make that seamless relationship? Because we're trying to do it most in house. We do have consultants. We have to have consultants to help us, but we all want to own our little piece of this thing, right? It's like, well, here's Sandy now telling me I have to do this overhand that looks different because it's gonna. No, it's just not the aesthetic I want, right? So how do we? Because we have to respect everybody, right? Like everybody's got something to say and something to bring to the table. I always ask, like, when do you come into the game? Is it at the inception of the
It
project?
literally depends, right? Like there's
Yeah,
projects where we'll come in at feasibility at the RFP when we're like, it's like super early stages. But and there's projects where we'll come in, like it's going through compliance, and we either need to make sure that it gets to compliance and need to have the team make some difficult decisions because there wasn't the right work done throughout, and now it's too late and it's not energy code compliant, and we have to tell the team, hey, you're going to have to make some changes, or we're just doing the compliance.
yeah. That's
But the
so
most
sad, though.
fun,
That's the hurtful part coming
those are
in.
the most cookie cutter projects. You just you do the compliance and you kind of move on. But the projects where I feel like the teams get the most value and are most empowered is where we're working hand in hand with the architects, where it's like, here's the range of options. I mean, I'm an architect by my background, so I know we all love to iterate. I know we all love to sketch not one option but 20 options. So that's basically what we do. We sketch not one but 20, and kind of go on to that design flow. I had one last question. I know we're running very close on time. Um, Given kind of both of your all's leadership within the AI community and the AI ecosystem, um, I'd love to learn about what the dialogue is as it relates to energy code within the AI. How are you all thinking about it, if at all, or what are other architects or the within the communities that you're leading? What is the discussion? How should we put this into the discussion if it isn't already there?
I think Laura can talk about the young architects, and I'll talk about the small firm exchange since we both are young architect forum members. So yeah.
Yes, no, for sure. And I think we cover a variety of project types, like in the larger, more commercial world um, where I'm from. I think many people, well, there's a lot of people who are in that world and are active in AIA and other AEC communities. So I would say that we need more conversations about it. And the reason why I think that's valuable is because we have to think ahead of codes. We can't live in a state where we're kind of reactive to a code update. And that does a few things for us. I guess harkening back to your previous question, that's something that provides value always. And if we have more conversations about it, maybe in other market sectors, or what's that firm over there doing? How does that impact your design process? And we can start to optimize our workflows to really give the best foot forward in terms of making sure that when the next big energy code update comes out, we're prepared, and maybe we've already done something that's really similar, especially as more jurisdictions are starting to require LEED certification. And that's something that's beyond energy codes. We have to learn from those projects. So it not only prepares us for the next energy code update, it's helping us to just be better designers in general, that can take on a lot of different kinds of work, no matter what the local municipality requires.
Yeah, I would say that from the small firm exchange side, which I'm a board member at the national level for AIA, this year we're talking a lot about practice, and I guess I love that topic because that's what I care about the most, to be honest. And what I've noticed is that it is hard to be a small firm owner and also a minority small firm owner, to add another layer, right? So sometimes there's so many hats that you drop the ball, but thank God that the framework exists, to be honest, because now that we know what we're being measured with to get even awards within the AIA, even if that's, it's probably the wrong reason. Oh, I want to do net zero homes because I get awards. No, it's I want to do net zero homes because it makes a better world. But it's making it that we all talking the same talk right now when it comes to the belief system. We all want to do all of those things, and there is this one mantra: if you can only do one thing, right? If you can only do one thing out of all of these things, what can you do, right? So there's no small steps. So I'm glad that within the SFX we're talking about that. We've had some lectures about what the framework is and how we can all work together on that. But like I said, we have our bottom line too, so it becomes very difficult to balance all of these items and remain profitable. Of course, there is a method to the madness. If you do better buildings, you can charge more for them, right? Like, come on, you're doing better architecture. So little by little, the landscape is changing, the community is changing, and we're all subscribing to the same values, which is exciting, to be honest. It's like a time and place right now where a lot of these codes have changed, and we're like, thank God we're now being imposed to have to do it. So the clients don't even have a choice. You don't have a choice. It's like, listen, you got to pass this air test, the door blower test.
It's almost like we don't have to be the boogeyman anymore. We can be like, well, the codes have changed. No, I'm not wanting you to pay more for your building. The codes have evolved. That's a really funny way to put it. But all to say that I find Darwin, yourself, and Laura, you so incredibly inspiring in a different way, right? Like Laura, the work that you're leading with the communities, and Darwin, the firm that you're building with your core values aligned to every part of the flow design. I can't tell you just how exhilarating it is to hear from someone with so much passion. I know that we only have a minute. I'm so sorry, audience. I did not give you more opportunity to ask questions, but if you have any burning questions, we might have time for one, and we'll see if we can try to squeeze in another. So I'll pause here, see if any of y'all have questions.
I also just wanted to add in, while we're waiting on that, Darwin, I think the small firm exchange is also a great community when we're talking about how can we kind of use our activism and involvement in different AEC organizations to drive these conversations. So, you're talking about, like, especially small firms are a great example of a community that could really benefit from resource pooling. And that's why I think creating more resources to have these conversations is really critical, because you've given some great examples of how it's been really beneficial for small firms.
Most definitely. And I mean, 90% of all architecture firms are small firms. So it's the power is most definitely in the numbers. Well, I know we're right on time. I cannot thank you enough, Laura and Darwin, for taking time out of your busy schedule to have this important and insightful conversation. I can't wait to be in touch outside of the panel, but thank you for taking the time. Have an awesome rest of your day.
Yeah, we'll see you IIA here in Massachusetts next year.
That's right.
Boston. Come on, we'll do it.
That's right.
Thank you for having me, Sandeep.
Of
Thank you for
course.
having us.
See you soon, Laura. I think we'll see you next year at the